Welcome to this session that I'm delivering. First of all, an introduction of me. So I'm Danny Moody. I'm Chief Executive at the Northamptonshire County Association of Local Councils, which is the membership organisation for all of the parish and town councils across the county of Northamptonshire. And there are 271 parish and town councils in Northamptonshire, so they keep me out of trouble and keep me busy. So today I've been asked to come along and talk to you about the support that a parish or town council can give to voluntary and community sector organisations in the county. And I hope that everybody here is from Northamptonshire, but if you happen to be from outside Northamptonshire, the same principles apply to wherever you are. So I'm just going to share my screen now, and perhaps Sean, if you could tell me that it is showing correctly on the screen.
It is. That's coming up.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
So Jacqueline there, if you don't mind turning your camera off, Jacqueline, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to look at what would you do if you wanted to get a grant from your local council, and local council means a parish council, a town council, a parish meeting, a community council. They're collectively known as local councils. So we're going to talk just a little bit about what parish and town councils are, why it is often useful and powerful for voluntary and community sector organisations to collaborate with their local council, what type of support is available to voluntary and community sector organisations, some tips for a successful application. I'm not really looking at sort of grant writing tips there, I'm talking about tips for working with a parish council, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions and answers at the end. And if you've got particular projects that you've got in mind and want my view on whether the parish or town council locally would support them, we're happy to discuss that. Or if you've got any questions about the parish or town council where your organisation is based, I'm happy to discuss that as well. So parish and town councils, or collectively known as local councils, there's 271 in Northamptonshire, and the whole of Northamptonshire has a parish council. So there isn't anywhere in Northamptonshire that isn't represented by a parish or town council, and that's quite a new thing. It's only been since 2021. Some of you may know that the whole of local government was reorganised in Northamptonshire, and that created some new town councils in Kettering, Corby, Wellingborough and Northampton. So now every person who lives in Northamptonshire is represented by a parish or town council, and then one of the unitary councils, either West Northamptonshire Council or North Northamptonshire Council, depending on which side of the county you are on. But a parish or town council is a local authority, just the same as WNC or NNC. They are local authorities, so they exist through law. The law says that there must be a parish council in that area, and they are public sector organisations. So there is some overlap between the parish and town council sector and the voluntary and community sector. And I think the smaller the community, the fuzzier the lines are between those things. And indeed, many very small and rural parish councils might consider themselves to be a voluntary sector organisation, and that the councillors on that council are volunteers. That's not correct, but that's how they feel. So a councillor, a parish or town councillor, is an elected public official, and they are a member of a local authority. But whatever size of council it is, their raison d'etre is to improve the social, economic and environmental well-being of the area. Now that encompasses pretty much everything, doesn't it? But you know, their job is to do brilliant things for their community and to make the community a thriving place to live. Parish and town councils in Northamptonshire range from a small parish in West Northamptonshire called Althorpe, which is the ancestral home of the Spencer family, Lady Diana and so on. That has 10 electors. It's a parish meeting. It doesn't even have a council. It's just 10 electors. Tiny, tiny little parish. And I imagine if anything needs doing there, then the Spencer family pays for it directly. Right up to, at the other end of the scale, 100,000 electors. That's Northampton Town Council, one of the new councils created in 2021, and everything in between. But I often talk about the rule of fives when it comes to a parish council. So your typical bread and butter common or garden parish council in England has 5 councillors, a clerk, an officer, working 5 hours a week. It has 500 electors, and it has a precept, which is the money that they're able to spend, of £5,000. So that's a typical bread and butter parish or town council. So you can imagine one that's got 100,000 electors is quite at the far end, the extreme end of the bell curve there. And Northampton Town Council will be spending several £1 million a year. But your bread and butter parish council is a small organisation. Whatever size the council is, the key contact is the clerk to the council. And the way to find a parish council normally is just to Google your place name and put in parish or town council, and typically the Google will return the website of your local council. And then normally very visibly on that website somewhere is the contact details, and it will be for the clerk to the council. So whether it's a clerk working 5 hours a week at a tiny parish council or clerk full-time at a town council, that's the person who you need to have the contact with and to engage with. So what are the benefits of working with a local council? Well, the obvious one is access to funding opportunities. So I mentioned that parish and town councils have the precept that is part of the council tax. So parish and town councils have tax raising powers. Each year they decide how much they would like to spend in the following year, and they send what's called a precept demand to the billing authority, which is either West Northants Council or North Northants Council, depending on the side of the county. And those councils collect that money from the council taxpayers in that area and then send it to the parish or town council. So they have their own source of funding, and that's one of the key differences between parish and town councils in the public sector, the local authority sector, and voluntary and community sector organisations that typically rely on grants and or their own generated funding. Parish and town councils have the legal power to raise funds through taxation. And often a parish council, and we advise them all to do so, make a proportion of that precept funding available to grants and organisations in their community through a small grant scheme. Now, not all parish and town councils do it, but it's becoming a more common thing. And during COVID, I think that encouraged a lot of parish councils to set up a small grant scheme that didn't have one before, because that was a time that community groups really needed the financial support. Apart from the small grants, it is possible to work with your local council on a joint application for a larger grant, and there's significant advantages in putting forward a grant application that is in effect in partnership between the voluntary and community sector and the local authority sector via a parish or town council. Grant giving bodies very attracted to that because it shows joined up thinking and shared goals and shared objectives within a community. So it ticks a lot of boxes. And then lastly, parish and town councils have the legal power to borrow money or to get a loan. So if it's a really big capital project, rather than the community saving up over a long period of time in order to have enough money to deliver the project. There is a possibility, and obviously this would be up to the parish or town council to decide whether they wanted to get involved in it, but there would be the possibility of the parish or town council borrowing the capital sum and then working out how that loan was going to be paid back over a period of time. So parish councils, town councils can borrow an unlimited amount over 50 years. So it's a big capital project, typically a building, a community centre, village hall, something like that. And the parish council can borrow money so that the project gets delivered and then it's paid back. That loan is paid back by the people who are then using that community asset. Apart from cash, they can provide support in kind sometimes. So it might be that some of the parish or town councillors have expertise in project management or building projects or whatever it might be. And they might be willing to lend that support. Potentially, they could make administrative support available to a voluntary and community sector organisation if it needed it. So there's all sorts of ways that a parish council can support a group or organisation in their community other than just cash. So I'd say that cash is probably the most common by a long way. But if a voluntary or community sector group needs help, talk to the parish council. They might be able to help or signpost to where that sort of help is available from. And then probably the most important thing is about building strong community relationships. And the best communities are where the various different elements of the community are working together towards common goals. So you've got a strong and vibrant voluntary and community sector working hand in hand with the local authority sector and businesses and the schools and everybody else, all working together. In fact, I was in Malton last night at an event there, and it came through very, very clearly and strongly that the parish council, the GP surgery, the schools, businesses, we're all working together towards common goals to improve health and well-being in that community, and it feels strong and it feels powerful. So let's just look at small grants in slightly more detail. So many local councils will have an annual small grants programme. Not every single one, but many of them will, and typically it works on an annual basis. So there'll be some kind of application process and application deadlines, and the council will consider the applications received typically on an annual basis. That's more common than having something on a rolling basis. If your local parish or town council doesn't have a small grant scheme, then ask them to put one in place. It might be that they just hadn't realised that there was any demand or hadn't thought of it or had missed the advice to set one up. So if they haven't got one, don't despair. That's not necessarily the end of the road. Just get in touch with the clerk to the council and suggest that they consider putting one in place. So you can work on an ad hoc basis, even if the parish council or town council hasn't got a small grant scheme formally. It's still worth writing to the clerk and saying, look, I know you haven't got a grant scheme, but we would like this support. And so would you consider that on an ad hoc basis? And there's no reason why a parish or town council can't do that. But clearly, it's better from the parish or town council's point of view to have a scheme and a structure and a programme and deadlines, and then they know where they are. There isn't a kind of hard and fast amount that parish and town councils would typically allocate to a scheme, but around about 5% would be common. So, a parish council with a precept of £10,000, let's say, might be allocating £500 of that to a small grant scheme. And clearly, the bigger the council, the higher the precept, therefore, the higher the small grants programme would be. So it's a relatively small element of the parish council's overall expenditure each year, but it's recognising that the parish council itself can't deliver everything in a community, and often the parish council isn't the best body to deliver things in the community. They because they're local authorities, they're sometimes quite slow to react. They've got a lot of rules and regulations that they need to abide by. They can't do anything that they don't have a legal power to do, for example. So often they're not the best organisation to actually deliver a service in a community, whereas the voluntary and community sector might be. So what the role of the parish council is to provide seed funding in order to support the voluntary and community sector organisation. So a typical grant, could be up to a few £100, but a parish council can apply the pot flexibly. So let's say, for example, that its total small grants scheme pot was £1,000, and they've said each application will fund up to £200, but they only get one person applying. Well, then that parish council could say, okay, we've had one application, so that's £200. Or it could say, well, look, there's only one application, the total pot was £1,000. Let's see if that group or organisation wants more money, and we'll apply all of the pot to that organisation if they want the money. Obviously, it's just potluck as to whether the grant scheme is well subscribed or not. I think quite often, and it's becoming more common, the grant scheme is oversubscribed. So you'd be looking at the maximum per application amount, but there's always that possibility of the parish council giving more. The important thing is with a parish or town council grant that it's a hand up, not a handout. One of the things that parish and town councils tell us over and over again with small grant schemes is that they will not fund a lazy organisation. So if a voluntary and community sector organisation just thinks, oh, well, we don't really need to bother with fundraising ourselves, we don't really need to bother looking at what grants are available to us out there, we'll just go to the parish council because it's easy, and we'll get them to fund our revenue costs, our running costs, that's not going to wash. Most parish councils would want to reject an application like that. So what a parish council is really interested in is a hand up, an amount of money that they can give to a village or town organisation that will enable that organisation to do something that it wouldn't have otherwise been able to do. So the group or organisation can demonstrate that it's tried everywhere else, and it can't get funding for a particular reason. I mean, maybe it's because the amount they need is too small an amount, and the grant funders don't want to bother with the hassle of an application. So we can't get a grant, it's too small amount, so we're coming to the parish council. We can't get a grant because we're not a constituted group, so we're coming to the parish council. We're going for a grant, but it requires 50% match funding, and we don't have the ability to fundraise ourselves for whatever reason. So if you could give us a grant, then we can use that as match funding to get the other grant. So every pound you give us is worth £2 in the end. Those are the sorts of things that parish and town councils get really excited about. So if you've tried everywhere else and had no luck, then the parish council is a good place to go to. So who can apply for one of these grants? Well, local councils can set their own criteria, but typically a parish council is constrained to doing things in its area. So I live in Helmden in West Northamptonshire. It would be unlawful for Helmden Parish Council to fund something that was going on in Braybrook, for example, in North Northamptonshire. So typically a parish council or a town council can only fund things that have a direct benefit to the area that they serve. So typically they're looking at grants and organisations in the area. Now, if there's a voluntary or community sector organisation that covers a wider area than a single community, a single parish, then a parish council could engage with that organisation, but only if that organisation can demonstrate that there would be a benefit in that parish council's area. So outside groups, yeah, that maybe let's say there's a group that's based in Northampton, but it provides services in Helmden, a village, then the parish council of Helmden could consider funding that group for the activity that's provided in Helmden, even though the group is headquartered, if you like, in Northampton. So constituted groups and organisations with a bank account and suitable governance are what a parish council is ideally looking to fund, because you have to remember that a parish council is raising money from tax, so it's what we call the public purse. It's public money, so they have to use it very carefully and wisely. And there's all sorts of financial rules and regulations that govern how they can spend their money. So it would be unusual for a parish council to give money to a private individual for obvious reasons. That private individual might disappear the following day. So ideally, they're looking for a group that has a constitution, that has a bank account, that has a chair, a treasurer, a secretary, so that there is some kind of safeguard for that public money if they award a grant. That's not a hard and fast situation, though. So one of the ways that I think parish and town councils can be quite useful is in setting up new activity and supporting new activity. So it might be that a group starts up and is in response to something that's happening in that community, but it doesn't yet have a constitution, it doesn't yet have a bank account, but it needs, a small amount of money normally, just to get going in the first place. I mean, sometimes it needs a little bit of money in order to get a constitution and a bank account and access to the appropriate support, even if it's just a few pounds. So a parish council could say, well, look, normally we are requiring a constitution and evidence of a bank account and so on, but we recognise the exceptional circumstances that exist in this situation, so we are willing to apply a grant. I mean, the parish council would still want to sense check it and risk assess it, wouldn't it? It wouldn't say that just to a random person who had emailed in or something. But if it was a group of people in the community who were known through other groups and organisations or other activities in the community, so there was a certain amount of personal trust there, then the parish council can make it an exception. And I think it's one of the great things about working with parish and town councils. They are community focused organisations themselves, and can work in that flexible way. It's not a faceless national grant body that won't take the time to understand what the applicants are trying to achieve. So if you can demonstrate to a parish council that what you're trying to achieve aligns with what they're trying to achieve, then they can have that flexible conversation with you. So a few tips for a successful application. I mean, first of all, use the form provided if there is one, and follow the instructions. And that is general advice that applies to all grant applications. Normally, there will be certain instructions. Please provide a copy of your last year's accounts or an explanation of why you can't provide them. For goodness sake, fill in the box, because there's nothing more frustrating for a parish council than receiving an incomplete application. Obviously, make a clear and concise project description sufficient for the clerk to the council to know exactly what you need the money for and what it's going to be spent on. But bear in mind that at some point, these grant applications are going to be presented to councillors. And it would typically be a council meeting or a committee meeting where there's an awful lot of other business to do, and there'll be a limit to how much those councillors can prepare in advance. So the more concise and more descriptive you can be, the better. You might have just a few sentences and a few minutes to grab a councillor's attention and say, wow, this is a really good application. This is something that we must support in the community. It's grabbing their attention in a very short space of time. The way to do that is to directly demonstrate community benefit. So a councillor who is the decision maker, the councillors are collectively going to be deciding who to award grants to. What they're looking for is, well, how is this going to benefit this community? How do I understand that the parish or town council giving this money will have an impact out there? And what is that impact? How is this community going to benefit if we allocate this grant funding? And then critically, and going back to the point I made about grant being a hand up, not a hand out, state why the funding is needed and the other avenues that have been explored. So you're trying to get across to the parish council that you haven't come to them as a first resort, you've come to them almost as a last resort. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be last resort, but you should definitely be able to demonstrate that you've explored some other avenues and that there's been some kind of barrier, some kind of obstacle that's been hard for your voluntary or community sector group to get over. And that's why then you've come to see if the parish council will provide a grant. And then obviously for anything, provide detailed costings and quotes. I mean, you don't need to go into a huge amount of detail typically for parish council grant, and we're recognising that typically it's only a few £100, so the amount of information provided in an application is commensurate with the amount of funding that's available. But if you can show that you've thought about the project in sufficient detail, that you've got detailed costings and maybe even quotes, then that will stand the application in good stead. And then a couple more general things that will help with making a successful application. So I think where possible, you would try to build a relationship with the local council over a period of time. So again, you bear in mind that parish and town councillors are human beings and they're members of the community. If you just pop up from nowhere, put in a grant application and then disappear again, that's unlikely to sort of make the councillors feel that it's something worth their support. Whereas if you've been able to engage with the local council over a period of time, the councillors know your group or organisation. You've perhaps been to the annual village meeting, the annual parish meeting, the annual town meeting, whatever it's called in your area, and you've talked to the parish council about what you're trying to achieve as a group or organisation, then when you put your application in, they know you, they know what you're trying to achieve, they know what you're about, they might be able to see the impact that activity has already had in the community, and therefore they're more likely to support the application when it arrives. I mean, for me, and I am a parish councillor, I think it's sometimes frustrating when we have a long parish council meeting of which there's a single item to make awards under our small grant scheme, and grant applicants arrive midway through the meeting ready for that item on the agenda, and then they leave immediately that item on the agenda has been transacted. And you're sat there thinking, okay, well, you wanted us to be interested in what you're trying to achieve and to financially support that, but you've just dipped into our meeting just to see how you got on. It would have been polite and quite nice if you had sat through the meeting. We could have had more discussion and got to know you a bit better before we decided whether we were going to make a grant application to you. Remember that parish and town councils, just like all sorts of other community organisations, are people organisations. So it's the clerk who is the officer of the council, and the councillors who are the decision makers, and try and engage with them as much as you can. You might, for example, invite the clerk along to a meeting of your organisation, or if it's a physical project, you might say, would you like to meet us on site and we can show you what we're trying to achieve. That kind of thing is really powerful and helps with those people feeling buy-in to what you're trying to achieve, and therefore more likely to fund it. As well as staying for the whole meeting where your grant application is being decided, it might even be useful to attend several other meetings before and afterwards. It's all about this thing of not just popping up, asking for money and then disappearing again. You can see feedback from the clerk. I wouldn't recommend seeking feedback from the councillors, because they're in a situation where they're going to be needing to make the decision at the end of the day, so they won't tell you in advance whether yours is a good application or not. Well, they shouldn't tell you that, because they don't want the risk of saying, well, it's a good application, and then the council collectively deciding not to fund it. But the clerk certainly can. The clerk can give you advice on what sort of things the parish council has funded in the past, what kind of applications the parish council is interested in receiving, whether what you're trying to do aligns with what the parish council is trying to do, for example, whether the grant application is correct. I mean, I would put some effort into a grant application, but I would always email it to the clerk and say, please could you let me know if there's any information missing, and hopefully the clerk would then review it for you and let you know, so that when the applications are put before the councillors, then you can be sure that they've got everything that they need ready. And then really critically, and it's surprising how often this doesn't happen, if you are a group or organisation that has been awarded a grant from a parish or town council, then say thank you at the very least. And it seems like a really obvious thing to say, but it's surprising how many times our member councils tell us, well, we funded them, we've no idea what they did with the money. So say thank you when you receive the good news that you've been awarded a grant. But then for me, if I was on the other side of the fence, I would be contacting the council, maybe even frequently, to say, this is what we've spent the grant on. Please see photographs attached. This is the impact that it had. We're also grateful this has enabled this activity to happen that otherwise wouldn't have happened without your generous support. All of that kind of stuff, in preparation for you putting in a grant application the following year. So in councillors' minds, if they gave out some money and didn't hear anything ever again from that organisation, and then they apply the following year, then they're already on the back foot. Whereas if you've given a grant and that organisation has told you exactly how it's been spent, photographs are brilliant, picture tells 1,000 words, and the councillors have seen all of that, and they've perhaps witnessed firsthand the impact because you invited them to an event or something, or the opening ceremony, or whatever it was that you wanted the money for. Then when that organisation comes in the next year, or in subsequent years even, then they're already on the front foot because they've provided that feedback. So, like I say, use Google to try to find your parish or town council if you don't already know how to contact them. But if that fails, then there are lists of the parish and town councils and their contact details on the Unitary Council websites, and those are the links. I mean, obviously you probably wouldn't write that down, but you'll either get those in the copy of the slides that you receive, or go on to the West Northamptonshire Council or North Northamptonshire Council. They are very easy to find on Google, and just click on parish councils and you'll get a link through to the details. But what you're looking for is the clerk to the council, and so often that's the email address is clerk@ and then whatever the council's domain is. So if it's I don't know, Northampton Town Council, for example, it would be clark@northamptontowncouncil.gov.uk.